What can you do with your old acrylic paintings? Well, I'm going to show you how I reuse my canvas painting in this step-by-step Seascape acrylic painting tutorial. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to my acrylic channel. So, shall we get started? So here is the old acrylic painting. You're probably horrified by it, but I was doing lots of sort of experimental techniques and I actually just washed it off all in the end, so you can't really see the painting here. But I just decided I wasn't going to carry on with it, leave it to dry, and I'm actually going to reuse it now and show you that you don't have to throw your canvases away. You can actually reuse them. For a full list of all the materials, please check out the description below. I'm using a small brush there just to draw in the horizon, and I'm actually mixing some blue, red and white to paint in a sort of soft, sort of violet looking blue-violet sky, adding a little bit more white, blending with my 1-inch flat brush. And I'm using a Stay Wet palette, and I'll put a link in the description below all about how I made the Stay Wet palette, which you might find useful. It just stops the acrylics drying out while you're using them. As you saw there, I actually added some of the red and white, quite a pale, soft, it's almost like a light pink colour, and I quite like the colours that are in the photograph as well in the sky. I've added some yellow to that colour and some more white, so it's a very soft, that was a little bit strong actually what I put on there, so I'm adding a touch more white to that colour and just blending into the sky there, so you've got a really soft sort of yellowish horizon. But if you want to stick to the sort of pinky colour, that you can. And I'm adding just pure white now with my flat 1-inch brush and just blending there just below the horizon as well. It just makes it easier when you actually paint in the sea later. But meanwhile, I'm using a little bit of yellow and I'm going to draw with my flat 1-inch brush the outline of the cliffs. You might find it easier actually to use a smaller brush. I quite like using a larger brush. It just keeps me from tightening up. I'm using red oxide violet, the yellow and the white here, and it creates a sort of an earthy sort of yellow colour, but you could use yellow ochre or raw sienna. I quite like using a limited palette because it gets you to really understand and know your colours. So I'm adding a little bit more white here, painting in the cliffs, just keeping everything really loose. I'm also going to use some light greens, mixing up the blue with the yellow, maybe a touch of the red, really to shape in the markings of these cliffs here with all the sort of grasses. So the painting has dried and I'm using some blue and white and painting that wet on dry with my flat 1-inch brush onto the horizon there. You can add a little bit of the red, maybe just to kind of darken it up slightly. And it's quite dark on the horizon as well, so I want to keep that sort of quite strong, and then you can sort of change the tonal values as you work your way down. If you notice there, I painted bigger marks in the foreground, sort of thinner marks in the background to create depth. And as you notice, I've removed the washi tape, and look at that lovely straight line. If you don't have washi tape, you could use masking tape. I'm just finessing the cliff here. I'd sort of just need to reshape it, because remember earlier I painted very loose drawings. So I'm just using my little liner brush here just to kind of make a few little corrections. And that is what I love about acrylic painting, that you can actually make corrections, change things, so there's no pressure. And as you saw, I had an underpainting there, another acrylic painting, which was a complete disaster, and it has gone, and it's nice and smooth as well. What I will say though, if you do keep reusing the canvases, if you paint in a very thick impasto way, it's quite tricky sometimes to paint over the top. So I think you only have so many chances. So if you find that the underpainting is resisting your acrylics, it's probably time maybe to get yourself another canvas. But I know a lot of students who've painted over them more than 5 times. And they do get heavy because of all the paint. But I think when they get a little bit thick and lumpy, it's tricky to paint over the top. In this instance, it was quite smooth. And I'm now sort of finessing there. As you saw, I redrew some of the drawing with some white paint with my liner brush, and I'm just painting in now some yellow and white, just to kind of paint some of the lighter areas, and just adding a little bit of red there to warm it up. Again, it's really just the 3 primary colours I'm using here to get as many colours as I can out of them. And I'm using my flat 1/2 inch brush, wet on dry. And I'm also going to use this to finesse some of the grass areas as well, using the blue, the yellow, touch of red maybe, and a touch of violet. I thought it'd be quite nice for some of you that like the card technique to actually create some texture on the cliffs here using some white paint. I'm just printing with the card. It's just a plastic bank card that is out of date. So it has other uses now. So it's quite nice to kind of sculpt some of these markings here with the bank card. I'm working back into the sea here. I've added some white with a tiny touch of the red. I'm just blending in some light in the sea here with my fingertips. You can also do that with a brush, and I'm just mixing up some blue and white and adding a little bit more paler blue towards the foreground area of the painting, wet on dry. I'm using pure white now with my flat 1 inch brush and painting wet on dry some of the surf just at the bottom of the cliff there. Sort of in almost a dry brush technique as well, so you can see some of the dark sort of blue coming through. I've mixed up a little bit of the blue, tiny touch of yellow, and I'm using a flat 1 inch brush and sort of blending through this sort of slightly sort of sea green colour, going back into the blue with a touch of red here, just to make this dark area right up to the cliff there, to really bring out the cliff, so you've got a light against dark. I thought I'd paint a little bit more light in the sky with my flat 1-inch brush, using some white titanium, almost scrubbing it through, just to create a little bit more light. Sometimes when the acrylic painting has dried, it can look a little bit dull. I find another layer sometimes really freshens and brightens the colours up. And I'm using a sort of a scrubbing technique here to create some light in the water. Make sure you don't have too much paint on your brush. As you saw there, I took some excess off with the paper towel. I'm using my liner brush now. I've watered down the white titanium paint and I'm just doing a little bit of spattering just in the foreground. I'm just mixing up a little bit of limey green and spattering that also with yellow, white with a touch of blue. So I was going to leave my painting there, and as you can see I've got different colours in my palette because I actually finished painting, and this is like a day later, and I thought, you know, I'd like to do a little bit more to this painting and add a little bit more detail. So the other one was quite loose. This is going to be a little bit more refined, little bit more detail, and I'm actually going to paint a white sail on the horizon also. So I've added here some of the yellow, white and red. I'm not using the violet here, I'm just sticking to the 3 primary colours, and I've mixed up that sort of earthy yellow colour there to scrub it onto the top of the cliffs, using a little bit of lighter green here at the bottom. So I thought it was really sort of a useful thing to you to see that, you know, you can settle with something that's quite loose, but also you can go back in and start to refine, you know, using a lot more detail. And I quite like that. Sometimes it could be a little bit of overworking, but the beauty of acrylics is you can paint over the top, so it's quite nice to practice and try out different things as well. So I wanted to kind of really put a lot more information here, so I'm using sort of more mid-tone greens, smaller marks, and sort of using the edge of my flat brush there just to create grasses in the foreground as well, adding some white to that yellow with a touch of red, sort of really sort of using the side of the brush and scrubbing to create some texture there on the cliff tops. So I'm adding a little bit of red, blue and white here, and I'm painting some shadows on the cliff here. There is a little bit there, and previously in my painting I had a lot of light and warm tones. So I'm just painting a little bit more shadow, and I'm painting a little bit more white in the water using my liner brush, really to make it a feature of it, so making more of it than what I see in the photograph. So I'm kind of making this painting my own a little bit. And I'm using the liner brush just to reshape the cliff here at the top. I felt I didn't have the shape right, and again, that's the beauty of acrylics. You can keep changing things, correcting them till you're happy with them, really. And I'm just sort of darkening a little bit at the top there. Again, just using these 3 primary colours. And to get a really dark green, you can use the blue with the yellow with a touch of the red. Gets you a lovely dark green. So I'm just scrubbing away, creating lots of little details here. So I painted some more darks, as you saw in the water there, and light on the horizon. I thought this side of the cliff here didn't look quite right, so I'm using some of the blue and the white just to reshape it along the edge and then scrub outwards. And it's a great way of sort of covering your sort of correction there. And I'm mixing up some of the red, blue and yellow here to make a brownie sort of colour. And I'm going to paint some markings on the cliff top there, again to paint more detail. And, you know, whereas before it was quite loose, impressionistic, it's a little bit more details here and there, using the tip of my brush, creating some of these dark markings. I even painted some pale blue on the cliffs there just to add a little bit of colour. And now as the painting has dried again, I've got to paint a little bit more light now because I've got those shadow colours. I want to paint a little bit more light to just sort of give the impression of the sort of white cliffs there, using white titanium paint wet on dry. I'm painting some dark sort of marks on the cliff here, just little dark markings using the corner of my brush with a mixture of the red, the blue and the yellow there. You can just sort of paint these sort of marks, these colours with trial and error really, and see what works best for your painting. As you saw there, I've created lots of shadows and textures using just these 3 primary colours. And just to finish off, I'm painting a little white sail using my little flat brush there and painting a bit of dark just at the bottom and then some white sort of reflection in the sea there, just blending with my fingertips there just to make it quite soft and just a bit wider just underneath the boat there as well. Finessing the sail there with my little liner brush as well, and a few little white marks in the sea to finish off that area of the painting. It looks so effective. I'm really pleased that I sort of went back into this painting, but to stop me from doing any more work, I'm using a little bit more of the watered down white titanium paint with my liner brush, and I'm just spattering off at the bottom of the cliffs there to finish off. And as a little happy accident, some of the white spatter went into the sea, so I've rubbed it off with my paper towel, but I quite like the effect that it had, those little white light markings in the sea. So here is the finished painting. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, especially of how to reuse your old canvases and going back into the painting and maybe finessing and making it your own by adding something, as I did with the white sail. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to my acrylic painting channel where you won't miss any of my future tutorials. And if you have any comments or questions, please put them in the comments section below. Thank you so much for watching. Happy painting. Bye for now.